Hello and welcome into Off the Bench. It is Thursday here in the Queen City. I'm Reed Mouse. We have a good show for you lined up today. Paul Dehner Jr. is going to be on the show at 10:30 talking about the Bengals. He had a big article that kind of made its way around social media earlier this week, kind of arguing for continuity, pleading the case for it. And we're going to ask about this Bengals offseason because, we keep similarly to how we call every single game a can't lose, gotta win, gotta have it kind of game. It feels like every single season's like this is the most important offseason in the history of the Bengals. And it's just, it is what it is. And the Bengals haven't made the postseason in 3 years. So we're going to talk with Paul Dehner at 10:30. We are going to talk a little bit about the Reds. I know you guys love when I talk about the Reds. That's why I wore red today. We're going to be talking about the Mark Sheldon article. I was listening to Chatterbox Reds. They were talking about the Mark Sheldon article that mentioned how the Reds don't want to, or loathe, highly against it. I wouldn't say it's an embargo on trading away their starting pitching, but they don't want to do it because it's a strength of the team and they don't want to ruin that. And we'll talk about how the Reds are once again going to have a new home for their games coming up here in the upcoming year. Stone Shields, Stone! You have a show starting at 11 o'clock today. Thank you so much for producing today. What's going to be on your show at 11 today?
We're going to roll through all the Bengals free agents that they have this coming offseason, and we're going to break down whether we think the Bengals should re-sign them or part ways, and that's going to be a big portion of our show. We'll talk about the college football game. I'd be interested to get your expertise. It doesn't look like it's on the rundown, but maybe we can fit it in there at the end before we get out at the 10 o'clock hour. But we got a game tonight. That's exciting.
Yeah, we do. I got really cocky. You asked me, and I think you did it pointedly. You were like, I want to hear you before the last round of games. You said, Reed, give me your take. Who do you think wins? Who do you think covers the spread? And the first one I said, a little bit in jest. I said, give me Miami, not only to cover but to win. Bam. Second one, I said, give me Indiana. Bam. And then I think I missed the other two. I think I missed the other two quite considerably. But, hey, no, I said Oregon. I got Oregon. I got the wrong cover on Indiana, and then I said Georgia outright. Okay. So I think I got 3 out of the 4 winners right. Yeah. I got 2 out of the 4. So you know what? We're not losing money, but I was getting a little cocky. I actually was like getting ready to type up text to Stone, talking a little junk, little bull junk here. But we had
-3 in favor of Miami against Ole Miss. You had quick analysis there tonight?
I did. I liked Trinidad Chambliss.
Yeah, he's pretty sweet.
Yeah, he's sweet. You know what? For a guy that played D2, that dude can play on Sundays.
I'm just worried about the size, but everything else,
Well, listen.
Yeah.
Do I think he's a franchise quarterback?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Do I think he's a long-term starting quarterback in the league? No, not at all. But the dude's clearly got talent enough to play on Sundays. We've all seen quarterbacks way worse. We watched Shedeur Sanders play this past Sunday. So we've seen quarterbacks way worse than him play in this league. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. I would probably say Miami.
Yeah.
I'll give the Miami proponents this season that despite, some 2 bad losses from the get-go, I know you and I listened to a lot of similar podcasts. There were some people that were really high on Miami from the opening tip of the season. They said this team could kind of bully you, and they've done that at times. They've had some ugly losses, but the Miami team's really good. So I'll take Miami. I'll take Miami to cover and to win. So there you go. There's the analysis.
Beautiful. Nobody better than you.
Correct. That is, I'm going to put that in my Twitter bio. Nobody better than me when it comes to college football analysis. It is in my Twitter bio. I am the most trusted voice regarding the Cincinnati Reds. And so this Mark Sheldon article comes out, and it is said the Reds loathe was the exact verbiage. They loathe having to trade away their starting pitching talent. And I was thinking about that. I went on a run this morning, and the entire time I'm thinking about what is my opinion on the Reds' unwillingness to trade away this starting pitching talent. And I flip-flopped. I'll be honest. I literally flip-flopped many a times about what the better course is because it is a dicey situation. Listen, the Reds made the postseason last year in a great majority because, the Mets just had an epic collapse, but primarily because of the strength of their starting pitcher. It is a true strength. It is a borderline elite starting pitching team. Like they're going to have a top 10 starting pitching. I don't know what you define as elite, but that's where they're at. They've got some some significant depth. They've got some high ceiling players like Hunter Green, like Chase Burns, like Nick Lodolo. And then you got depth like Brady Singer, Andrew Abbott, guys beneath that can eat up a lot of innings. They can have a really good year. And I was told at a very young age, you never sacrifice strength to plug a hole. If your starting second baseman or your starting shortstop goes down, you don't move your second baseman over to shortstop and sacrifice. Now you have a worse shortstop and you have a worse second baseman. No, you put someone else in there at shortstop. Your second baseman might be your best backup shortstop, but you don't sacrifice two positions to save one. So that's the first thought that goes in my mind. The Reds have a borderline elite starting pitching. Do they sacrifice that? Then I started to think, why would they do this? Well, it's to improve their lineup. I think we can all agree. We all watch the Reds. We all know that their lineup isn't up to snuff. Some players that are defensive first, Key Brian Hayes, some players that platoon, some guys that haven't hit up to their abilities, guys like Matt McClain. The Reds lineup isn't good enough to compete at a high level. Do I think that they are viable enough? Sure. But can they compete at a high level? Absolutely not. And while I want to sit here and go, the Reds should not want to trade away their starting pitching because that is elite, that is depth, that is something that they can hitch their wagon to, and it's a reason why they made the postseason last year. I got to admit that if it was a want to improve this lineup, if it was like, it has some high ceilings and it would be nice if we got a middle of the order bat. It'd be nice but it's not that. That's not the Reds lineup. It's a need to get more bats, to get another bat in that lineup. And quite honestly, not just one. Like they need a couple big bats. They need some guys to step up this year. More often than not, your better course of action is to, whatever you're elite at, you hold on to that. Cincinnati Bengals, they have an elite offense. They should not sacrifice their offense in order to save their defense, even though it maybe makes them a more well-rounded team. But if you're putting up 30, you just got to figure out a way to improve the defense without hurting the offense. And that's where I want to go for the Reds, is saying, yeah, this starting pitching is elite. It's really good. You don't want to sacrifice Brady Singer because Hunter Green's going to spend time on the IL more than likely this year. Nick Lodolo certainly will. Chase Burns won't have 30. Like these guys, there's going to be missing, and then you got a guy like Brady Singer that can eat up the innings in the back end and get you to the end of the year. It's, as I mentioned before, the currency of baseball isn't runs, it's outs, and it's an algorithm that more and more teams are factoring into the year. Look at my favorite team, the Chicago Cubs. Just like the Reds, they have 8 starting pitchers now. 15 years ago, you get 5, maybe 6 starting pitchers because you know one guy and he's a swing guy that comes out of the bullpen. But now, because injuries are so prevalent, you need to account for that and have depth. And that's what the Reds have. So the question is, are they willing to sacrifice that depth to enhance their lineup? And I think they kind of have to. Because it's not a want. It's a need. They have to improve this lineup. Or that elite, that really, really good starting rotation, that really high-end pitchers that they have, they're not going to be good enough in those high-impact games, in those postseason games, to get them over the hump. When you play in the postseason and you're going to be going up against the Phillies or the Dodgers or the Cubs or whoever, that lineup, it's not going to be good enough. And the starting pitching, as great as it is, isn't going to be able to stand that test. And what does 8 starting pitchers help you, which the goal is to make the postseason once again? 8 starting pitchers aren't going to help you in a 2 to 3 game series all that much. And you can say, well, yeah, you're not going to get there without depth at your starting pitcher, and you're right. But as I mentioned before, I don't think it's a want for the Reds. I don't think it's something that, I'd like to improve this lineup. It's a need. And I mentioned before, the starting or the lineup is going to the big ceiling raisers are coming internally. You need Ellie to be a little bit better than he was last year. You need Matt McClain to be a lot better than he was last year. You're going to need guys that have been around. You're going to need Ke'Bryan Hayes to step up a little bit. You're going to need CES if he gets a lot of swings to finally kind of develop into at least somewhat of a power hitter. You're going to need those things to happen, but you're also going to need to get something from the outside to improve this team. Stone, the proposition is this. The Reds have a great starting rotation. No one disagrees with that. It's one of the best top 10 in the league, and you can make a case for a top 5 if you really want to argue and debate. Got to be a better lawyer than I, though. The Reds don't want to trade away their starting pitching to improve their lineup. Is that something you're okay with? Is because, as I mentioned, when you have something elite, you don't want to sacrifice that to improve, to fix holes in the boat.
Yeah.
Are you cool with that, or do you think that it is not a want, it is a need to improve this lineup, and to do that, they're going to have to get rid of a Brady Singer, a Nick Lodolo, an Andrew Abbott?
I think it's funny is it seems like they're kind of taking a Bengal approach to this thing where it's like, well, we have these really good players, i.e. the starting rotation for the Cincinnati Reds, and they're banking on the development of some of the younger guys, and that's what we were worried about going into the offseason. Like, great, you made the playoffs, congrats, you need to do better next year and not just say, oh, these guys are all going to get better. Oh, Sal Stewart, he's going to get better. Matt McClain, he's going to get better. Spencer Steer, maybe he gets better. I know you don't think that, but I don't think
probably
that's
get worse.
I don't think that's the mindset that you should have. I think you should move off one of those guys to try to get a bat. That guy to me would be Brady Singer. I like Brady Singer a lot. He was terrific for you last year. He's a competitor out there on the mound, but I'm just worried that it's going to be kind of a similar year to last year, and you can't bank on the Mets collapsing and letting you sneak in through the back door again. You got to improve your team. You got to improve your offense, and just relying on some of these younger guys getting better with time, I don't know if that's the best avenue to take personally. So I love having a strong rotation. It's great. But to your point, Andrew Abbott didn't even touch the ball against the Dodgers, and that isn't, a great thing for Cincinnati. You can only have a couple of those guys get the ball, especially in the wild card round when it's a best of 3 situation. So I would have moved off one of them personally to try to get a bat.
It's so when you look at it, so if, now we're in the agreement that it's not a want, it's a need, that they have to improve this lineup by getting rid of some of their starting pitchers. The question is what does that look like? Who are you getting rid of? What are you bringing in? And the name that you mentioned, Brady Singer, yeah, he's got a $12 million contract, which you get rid of him, you go down 2 avenues. I can tell you right now that the trade market for Brady Singer isn't going to bring in a bat that is going to pique or tickle the fancies of many Reds fans. But then you can make the argument, well, that at $12 million, we can sign a bat. And once again, I don't think that is going to bring in a bat that is going to excite you if you clear up that $12 million to bring home someone that Chatterbox Reds mentioned, like a Harrison Bader. Does a Harrison Bader really excite you? That's about the money. You're actually going to spend a little bit more on Harrison Bader than what Brady Singer's making. So, okay. And I think I'm just kind of going through what they were talking about on Chatterbox Reds, both Craig and Nick Kirby, so shout out to them. They do a fantastic job. And I agree with Craig in this sentiment where he goes, Nick Lodolo, well, that's a guy that has a high ceiling, piques a lot of interest, and you can bring in a high-impact bat at that point, and then you're worried about how the money goes on. So, I mean, to say this, if they do make a trade, you're going to feel uncomfortable. There's never a win-win when you're a small market team. There's never, very rarely, are you going to, yes, the money makes sense. Yes, the prospects that we trade away make sense. Yes, it fits the team perfectly. That doesn't happen. It doesn't. And that's the luxury of the big markets, is they're just throwing money at it. They're not mortgaging future in terms of prospects. They're not doing anything like that. That's their luxury, but the Reds don't have that luxury. So whatever it is, it's going to take either a high-end talent like Nick Lodolo. It's going to require trading away some money. And I don't know. There is a right move out there. I'll say that. There is a right move out there for the Reds. It's just whatever it is, it's going to make you feel uncomfortable in some scenario to where they're giving away too many prospects, they're spending too much money, or it's a smaller end deal to where it doesn't really tickle, but it fits the Reds really nicely in terms of platooning or middle of the back and hit left, whatever it is. There is a good move out there for the Reds. And as I mentioned, while you don't want to give away want to be in the business of giving away or making something elite lesser than, at some point you've got to look at it and say, this isn't a want, this is a need. This lineup just isn't good enough. And the proposition of just crossing your fingers, I do think Matt McClain will be better, but crossing your fingers on several guys to be better. Like Spencer Steer is what he is, and it's not very good. Like Brian Hayes kind of is what he is with the bat. Maybe you can develop a little more at Great American Ballpark, get a little more pop out of that bat, but it is what it is. The platooning guys of Will Benson and the TJ Friedels and that guy and that kind of stuff. But we'll see. Only time will tell. I will say this: I think that it would be advantageous of the Reds, and this is going to frustrate some of you guys, to kind of sit pat, stand, wait for around spring training when the markets are getting smaller and smaller for these players, and as we know, deadlines make headlines, and if these players are wanting to get signed to a team, there's not a really whole incentive for them to take a lesser deal than they had anticipated. So just wait out the market just a little bit, wade through it, and then when it's time to pull the trigger, maybe you can get a deal that makes a lot of sense. But that's time. Another news came out about the Reds, and that is that once again they will be going away from FanDuel Network. As I mentioned, the Reds are expected to opt out of their TV deal with FanDuel Sports Network, which will mean that the Reds will more than likely be developed by, their games will be produced by Major League Baseball, which we've seen several teams in Major League Baseball take this avenue. We've seen several teams kind of just let their games be put on. They're not going to be on normal, YouTube TV. It's not going to be on Hulu Live, anything like that. It's going to be on traditional cable packages, but more often than not, you're going to have to get an app to your smart TV, and that's how you're going to have to stream the games. Out of market, people can still get on MLB TV. But here's the thing. The Reds, and I don't think this is necessarily their fault. In fact, I'd argue it's more than likely not. The regional sports networks kind of collapsed in 2019. Fox got out of the deal. They couldn't strike a deal with Google. They couldn't strike a deal with Disney into making these things work. And several new companies are trying to figure out a way to make it work, but they just keep falling flat on their face. And maybe the best path forward is producing the games themselves and seeing what you can draw in. I'll say this. If part of the Reds' future, if part of the Reds' money that they're bringing in, as it is a big portion is coming from these TV networks, is coming from how their games are streamed, how their games are broadcasted to the world, then the Reds have to figure out a long-term solution. Because every time that we do this shake-up, a new company, a new way that all the Reds fans have to figure out how to watch the games, you lose some. You lose fans every single time you do that. From when it went from Fox Sports to FanDuel and now to MLB and everything in, Bally Sports. So in the last 5-6 years, it's going to be the, fourth different way to watch the Reds. Every single time it switches, you lose a little bit of fandom. Just like the same way to where, a certain 10 a.m. Sports talk show on YouTube changes host every single year, you probably lose a little bit of viewership there too. If they hear it out off the bench, we're Monday through Friday, 10A, and the next year we're like, we're just going to be Tuesday and Thursday at 3P, and then the next year we're going to be, it's like when you change, continuity matters. And every single year, the Reds change their continuity, and it's going to, these teams, part of the reason the Yankees can spend so much money, part of the reason the Dodgers can spend so much money is they have their own networks. They make so much money from their TV deals. It's not just ticket sales. It's not just endorsements. It's not just sponsorship. It is a big portion coming from this TV market. And are the Reds ever going to get Yankee money from their TV market? Of course not. The Cubs are flopping on their own with Marquee Sports Network, which has been a big old flop. They have lost like $50 million a year from that deal. But I don't know. It's clearly a big portion of the Reds' budget, and they've got to figure out a way to make a long-term deal, whatever that is. And I think the MLB is probably the safest pace to do that. Do it on MLB TV like some other small market teams have. And I think MLB wants to kind of rein in all the markets as they can to build up something strong and collectively bargain across the board. Does the TV deal thing, Stone, does that scare you at all? Like just the fact that it keeps moving around. I mean, what's your takeaway from, once again, the Reds having a new broadcast partner?
I'm not there yet. I think people a lot smarter than me are certainly talking about it right now. But my biggest thing is, like, all right, when the season gets here, what do I need to do to get the game on the TV? And we'll kind of go from there. I always feel like they'll figure it out. Is there a world where the Reds, aren't on TV? I don't feel like that's ever going to happen.
No,
so I'm kind of just whatever you got to do it. If I got to buy some subscription, I'll be ticked off about it. But I'm not really there yet to get worked up about it. So are the announcers going to still be in place?
Yes. No, okay. They'll keep a great majority of their same talent. The interesting thing is if they ever lose, it'll be still through most cable packages. Like, that'll be how you can watch. That's at least the idea. Like, if you do a more modern cable package, YouTube TV, Hulu Live, Fubo, stuff like that, you're going to have to download a separate app on your smart TV, which most people have now. But if they ever lose the traditional cable packages, that's going to be incredibly alarming for the sports bars in the area. Because I don't know how you are, but I fear for the local sports pub where people have just been watching Reds games for forever, and they got some old owner, and then all of a sudden they've got to download some new things. Although with the addition of Thursday Night Football coming from Amazon Prime and things like that, they have kind of modernized that scenario. But I can tell you here in Hamilton, there's going to be a few saloons, a few speakeasies, a few watering holes that aren't going to pony up money to watch the Reds games, and it's going to completely shock them that first weekend, opening day, whenever, when they can't watch the Reds on their traditional cable packages. So they've got to figure out a long-term solution. It's point blank, and I don't know what that looks like. I think this is a very fluid situation. I think this is something for the Reds that it can be not a big portion of their budget, but clearly has some impact, and it's something that they rely on in terms of just bringing talent home. So they've just got to figure out a long-term solution because, I mean, from Fox Sports to Bally to FanDuel to now MLB TV, I mean, that's 4 different providers in 5 years. You can't keep doing that. You can't keep doing that. I don't know who's going to come in and save the day, whether it be MLB, whether it be Apple that's trying to expand their baseball coverage. I think they do a great job, by the way. Things like that, I don't know. Obviously, Apple's in the business of trying to gain leagues. They did it with the MLS. It'd be a much bigger undertaking to take on MLB, and you can't get league-wide because of things like Marquee Sports, like the Yes Network for the Yankees. I forget what the Dodgers is called, but several teams have their own network. What's the Red Sox? Golly, BSN, Boston Sports Network maybe. But all these teams are pretty set in their ways that already make a lot of money from their TV deals. But you can create, the small markets, like teams like the Pirates and the Diamondbacks and the Reds can kind of band together and see if they can create money, generate money themselves, the same way that the NFL has, and where teams like the Bengals, they turn a profit before they sell a single ticket because of their TV deals. That's how big of a market their TV deals are. And by the way, their ratings are up once again. Second highest, like 18 million per game. It's just absolutely insane how crazy the NFL is and how popular it is over the past few years. 83.5 wins. That's what Vegas had the Reds at. Do you like that line? Do you think it's over? Do you think it's under? What's your initial reaction to that line from Vegas on our beloved Cincinnati Reds?
Seems a tick high. I don't think they've done enough to this point. Again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier in the show, so reliant on, these guys are going to get better. They're definitely going to get better. They've been in the league an extra year. There's no way it can get worse. They're going to get better. I'm a little bit worried. With that line because, offensively, I'm not going to sit here and say, Matt McClain's, he's going to have a great year. What leads you to believe that that's going to happen? Yeah, he's got potential. Yeah, he was, as you pointed out to me yesterday, drafted twice in the first round. That's great, but I'm just not there yet offensively, so maybe I'm being a tick pessimistic, but that seems a notch high at this point.
Yeah, it's almost 3 years ago. It will be 3 years ago since Matt McClain's 2023, where he was trending to be not one of, but the best second baseman in baseball. When you play I'm pulling up his stats right now. When you play 89 games and it was on pace for like a 7-WAR season, 30 home runs out of a second baseman and playing a pretty good glove. Yeah, that's the reason. When you have an OPS plus of 127, which is 19 percentage points higher than Elly De La Cruz, who led the team last year, and like that's why you have the ceiling. And Matt McClain, yeah, you could say the injury and then one season, you could sour on it a lot. But let me put it this way, and I've said this before when it comes to this Reds team. If Matt McClain doesn't work and if Matt McClain and Elly De La Cruz don't work, then what is this team? What is it? Right? That's was the focus point of this team 3 years ago. Is you have this number one prospect, you have this guy that's been drafted twice in the first round, and Matt McClain, thought of very high, coach's son, like plays ball. And they come on the scene in 2023 and they light up the world. And then, Matt McClain gets hurt, and then he has a bad year, and it's always going to come internally. You look at all the small market teams that have made waves in Major League Baseball. It never comes from the outside. It's always internally. The one that people talk about, the 2015 Royals, all those guys, Alex Gordon, Mike Moustakas, center fielder Lorenzo Cain, all those guys came from internal. Even the Houston Astros, that's a big market, but all those guys, Alex Bregman, Jose Altuve, George Springer, those were all internal guys. The Cubs, big market team, everyone came from inside. Kyle Schwarber, Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, Addison Russell. It's got to come internally. It just has to. And the reason the Reds are in the same predicament that they've been for a while now is because they've been unable to develop great hitting talent. They just have. 15 years ago, they brought up Jay Bruce and Joey Votto. Brandon Phillips was really good coming from like those guys. Todd Frazier, those guys were internal. Brought them up. Since then, it's been few and far between. Elly De La Cruz is a great player, no doubt, superstar in the sport, like a true MVP-esque talent. But other than that, it's not been good. And it's got to be good. And I think they should trade away one of their starting pitchers here in the near future to enhance that lineup. 83.5 wins. I think it's around that. I'll tell you right now that if you talked about those over-unders for each of the teams of the National League Central, I'm taking the under on the Cubs at 87.5, and I'm taking the over on the Buccos at 77.5. Or whatever they're I think it was around 77.5. I like the Pirates a lot. I'm not so sure about the Cubbies. And who knows about the freaking Brewers. I mean, golly, it feels like every single year we're waiting on the Brewers to fall off. And they never do. They just never do. So, 10:30, we'll have Paul Dehner Jr. coming on here in a few moments. We're going to be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, we talked about the Reds to start this show. Stone Shield show coming up here at 11 o'clock. There's some more stuff that we're going to break down in the final few minutes of the show. More coaching stuff around the NFL. If John Harbaugh surprised you about being coach, there's now rumors that Matt LaFleur might even be losing his job. But I'm getting the thumbs up from Stone, so without further ado, we'll bring on Paul Dehner Jr. Paul he covers the Reds I've been talking Reds for the last half hour. Covers the Bengals on The Athletic, and obviously the host of the Growler podcast. Paul, thank you so much for being here.
What's up?
Yeah, I want to start off talking about the column that you put out earlier this week.
Okay.
I want to start off there because I think that I don't know. Bengals fans are a fickle bunch. They're a fickle bunch.
Oh, they're unhappy. Yeah. They don't like me right now. I've been called many names. It's okay. I like some of the names.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite name?
Propaganda Paul. I like.
Ooh.
That was a new one. I hadn't heard that one in a while, so I appreciate that.
A good alliteration is always
Yeah.
Propaganda Paul. All right, so you were making the case that the best path forward for the Bengals was continuity, and that's what they're doing with Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, they're just in a unique spot, and I don't think that it's necessarily about hey, here's the best head coach and GM in football, or the idea that you can't do better. It's more about timing and trust. So I don't know. the timing where they're at right now is in a very simple offseason. Like, this is as simple as it gets. Fix the damn defense, right? Like, that's
sure.
what it is. And you have the offenses in place. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, everything that they've done to have that set up is in a good place. And you have the play caller who's been in charge of that, the system, the staff, right? All of that. Knowing that you have that is maybe the biggest advantage they have going. One of the biggest problems in recent years has been the complexity of these off seasons. There's been a lot on their plate, and quite frankly, this ownership group has been unable to handle it. And I think what's lost in what I'm trying to say with this has been like, okay, it's not propaganda. What I'm saying is, I think when you have a simple offseason in front of them, making it more complex by now asking this ownership group to execute a GM and head coach change, which will inevitably change a lot of things, and there are going to be bumps in the roads because this is not like other places where it can be a simple transition. You have people who are like, oh, but the Jaguars, I shouldn't have to tell you the difference between Shad Khan and Mike Brown. Like, it's a very different atmosphere in terms of attention paid to the team, amount of money just thrown without looking at it. Like, it's just a different ball game to think that they could easily pull that off. And when you're in a spot where you have continuity with your offense and you have a very simple thing with money to just go fix the defense, I think they have a better chance of winning in 2026 with just riding with that right now, rather than bringing in the unknowns of now asking this ownership group to execute that kind of a change. That's, I think, where maybe my point gets lost, thinking that I'm like, yeah, this is great, propaganda Paul, like, run it back. I'm talking about the best chance to win in 2026, because as we've learned this year, you can't guarantee anything beyond that right now. Like, I think that this is the pressure cooker of pressure cookers next year. Like, this is it. It feels explosive if they don't go and win next year. And so that should be the only focus and the primary focus. And I think that that is the best path. I know a lot of people don't agree. And that's totally, like, understandable. I get the rage. I get the frustration. I get people who are like, you're an idiot. But I'm just saying, to me, that is the best path for this team to actually win in 2026. And maybe that's an indictment on the organization and sad and frustrating, but that's how I view it.
I don't want to call it an indictment on the organization, but if I'm reading through the tea leaves here, you're saying that the Bengals should do the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. And that's exactly the point that they should be going into this offseason.
Well, what happened the last couple off seasons? Like, it wasn't simple, and it didn't get executed correctly. And there was clearly a disconnect happening organizationally, whether it be with ownership and coaches, personnel department and coaches, players and ownership. I mean, how many trade demands and requests and people making public pushback and hold-ins and holdouts do you have to see until it's like, okay, how about something simpler here? And that is a way to get this offense and Joe Burrow and these weapons, who are finally in a good place with an actual offensive line you trust in front of them. Get them to next year with a defense that can be suitable. I don't think there are idiots in this organization. I know people will call them that. But this is the same group that has made a lot of good decisions in the past. It was a long time ago. People wish it was more recent. You know, the 23 draft is going to have to be something that they are building around, because that looks like it is turning into something that you can build around, and that's good. There has to be so much more of that because the free agency whiffs that have happened in recent years have set them back. But I don't think it's not like it's an impossibility for this group to go out there and execute this game plan. And I think it would be much harder for the organization to go out and execute something that included dramatic upheaval up top right now.
Listen, when it comes to Zach Taylor, if being a Zach Taylor, where you're at on the spectrum here, I think I'm more of a Zach Taylor fan than most Bengals fans. I would say this: 1-8 without Joe Burrow this year was pretty damning.
Yeah. No
and
doubt.
you put out that that column, I think it was on Tuesday morning is what time it came out, and then Tuesday afternoon comes out that the Ravens are parting ways with John Harbaugh.
Yeah.
This weekend, the Steelers might part ways with Mike Tomlin. There's even rumors that the Packers could part ways with LaFleur. Does that change your opinion at all, or are those like the Bengals aren't in those markets? Like this, the fact that guys like that are available, does that change your opinion on this thing at all?
No. Well, I mean, Harbaugh's a great coach. I mean, certainly, there's no doubt. The problem is what got no one knows exactly what got John Harbaugh run out of Baltimore. He was there for 18 years. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
A lot of continuity there, won a Super Bowl, but in recent years, the Bengals' success has probably been better than the Ravens' success. If you look in the Burrow-Jackson era,
Sure.
in terms of what they've accomplished in the postseason and what they haven't accomplished in the postseason. And really, let's be honest, his relationship souring with whatever was happening with Lamar Jackson between Todd Monken and John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson was a problem. And one of the things that everyone's worried about here is Joe Burrow's happiness. And I'm not saying Joe Burrow couldn't handle change.
Right.
He doesn't seem to be in a great place to want change. If Joe Burrow wanted change right now, he could get it. If there's anything we learned, right, like in recent years, if Joe Burrow said, I can't do it with this Taylor guy anymore, Zach Taylor would not be the head coach, okay? Let's make no bones about that. And if he was that strong, even about GM, I think we would be talking about no longer a de facto GM and Duke Tobin. I think Joe Burrow, if he wanted that, it could happen. Because when you have problems with that guy, whether it be Lamar Jackson, whether it be Joe Burrow, whether it be Josh Allen in Buffalo, who's had Sean McDermott the entirety of his career and they haven't won a Super Bowl, these right. On the periphery of Patrick Mahomes' second fiddles. When you have that problem, then change definitely becomes much more necessary or gets forced. And so I think that relationship is part of this too, in terms of Joe Burrow going and winning in 26 with, a way that he and these guys are comfortable with is important. And that's a part of this entire equation as well. As Joe Burrow wants Zach Taylor here, and he's made that pretty clear since the beginning of his time here. Now that can certainly change, and maybe he's at his wit's end with it, but that's not been the case for this season.
Do you think, and I'm going to label it as juice, like do you think that Joe Burrow has the most juice in that front office at Paycor Stadium outside of Mike Brown? Do you think he's got more sway than Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor do? Like, do you think he's number one there behind Mike Brown?
He might have more sway than any quarterback in football. I mean, in terms of what he means to the organization, sure. and his ability to impact real change. I just think they listen to him here. Mm-hmm. And I think they take that seriously, and they have listened to him. The Pets doesn't mean everything he wants he gets, although they did check every box he asked for this past offseason. Sure. Some people would say maybe they shouldn't be treating GM Joe like GM Joe as much because of some things that happened defensively. But I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they listen to him, and his opinion very much matters. They want him to be happy. I think there is scar tissue from Carson Palmer that people like to bring up. I think they've tried to be better about keeping their quarterback happy and feeling like he's heard and a part of things and leading something that everybody's on board with. I think they try to do that as best they can with him, and that means he has a lot of sway. They try to listen to him. It matters what he thinks, and if he thinks that Zach Taylor is his guy, then that matters to them organizationally, because I mean the whole thing runs around him. Sure. Like sure. They're not going to win a damn thing if he is hurt again next year, and that's the case for almost all of these tier 1 and tier 2 quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. You can have an occasional year where somebody can throw something together with a backup, like it can happen, but the reality is it just doesn't. There's only so many guys that are capable of doing this. And when you have one at this level, you got to have them healthy. And then you point to that's the frustration why I'd be more prone to say they should have done something last year, is because you did have more change and upheaval happening. is that, and you had him healthy the whole year and couldn't get him to the postseason, and that was the frustrating part about the defense falling apart at that point.
All right, let's talk about this team, and let's talk about that defense. Obviously, 3 big names are going to be free agents this year, guys that had been a part of the defense for the past few years. Trey Hendrickson, Joseph Ossai, Cam Taylor-Britt at the top. Do you anticipate any of them coming back in stripes next year?
Yeah, no Trey Hendrickson. I mean, I'm curious to see how vindictive they'll be. Vindictive is maybe the wrong word. They could tag and trade him and send him to, wherever.
Do you think there's any? Do you think there's going to be anything with Trey at all? Like, do you think
no? I think
it's
just a walk. I think it's just we're done with this. We're done. We're done with this mess. I mean, I don't see any world where he's back on the Bengals in 2026. And honestly, if we're going to start, you want to talk about the one thing that would be like, get out of here as an organization, is if they try to run back that Trays of Our Lives mess again and force him to, like, what are we be doing? And I don't get any impression that anybody has any patience for that internally.
Well, before you move on, do you think that the end of the year and him not playing, and there was kind of like some, I don't know, once again, trying to read through the tea leaves, that there might have been some frustration about whether Trey should have played or not. Do you think that added on to it, or do you think it was already dead before that even happened?
I think that cemented it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, okay. I think that whatever was happening there was the burning of a bridge that maybe was already kind of only had like one plank left, on the side. But it was like, okay, that's enough of that. And so I think that was the final piece that made it obvious that this whole thing is over. But we should have probably known that. Mm-hmm. I think they played nice when the pay raise thing happened, but that was as contentious as it gets this past offseason. So to think that everybody's going to be like, yeah, this is great, I'd love to go experience something like that again. Nobody on any side wants that.
All right, so let's talk about Cam Taylor-Britt, who obviously made headlines this week for other reasons. But Cam Taylor-Britt, I think, according to Sport Track I saw, was geared to make they estimated about $15 million AAV. Do you anticipate Cam Taylor? Yeah, kind of shocked me too.
No, that's not happening.
I fully agree. Could you anticipate Cam Taylor-Britt coming back in stripes next year, being a part of this team?
I don't know. No. I don't anticipate that, but I also don't anticipate him having some robust market. Now, guys that are young, that have played, and that have had levels of success, even though he's been, really the quintessential roller coaster corner, they have value because someone's going to think maybe they can bring them in, and the change of scenery can make a big difference. He doesn't have a path to play here. I mean, Dax and DJ are what they're kind of able to build around defensively right now, is having your outside corners set. So Cam would be signing here as a backup. The question would be, I think he just feels destined to go somewhere, signed a mid-level prove-it deal for whatever number, nothing huge, and be in a competition to be a number 2 outside corner somewhere. Like that feels right, and I don't see that being the best option to be here. Mm-hmm. Now, that free agency does surprising things, so they still need to fill out depth in their cornerback room. So I'm sure that there would be maybe an offer like, hey, you want to come and hang out and play maybe, or maybe we can come up with a role, you can be a backup. I don't see that being as enticing as going and maybe having a change of scenery competition somewhere else. When you just consider the ups and downs, the healthy scratch, multiple staffs have benched him now, like, it just feels like they move on.
Okay. Joseph Ossai, what about him?
More complicated. Most likely, I don't think he fits as a puzzle piece here right now with where they're at, because I feel like they have they have twos. They have Shamar, they have Miles Murphy. These guys are right now kind of like twos. I think you can get twos. I think Ossai will have a market. And so, but they will want something better than what he has given them to play opposite Miles. And so that money that you would give to whatever you would pay to Joseph Ossai, I don't think goes as far as if you put that money towards somebody who is a little bit higher production level that you would try to I don't think there's a door closed to Joseph Ossai coming back, but I think other teams might be more aggressive with him. The injury stuff makes me nervous. The wrist makes me nervous that he's dealt with, but how will other teams view that? I just don't feel like his money and role and everything else fits with where they're currently viewing what they need to do to rebuild that defensive line.
Okay, I was listening to the Growler earlier this morning, and your most recent episode centered around the linebacking room.
Yeah.
2 rookies. Wasn't good this year. Where do you think the future of the linebacking room is? Do you think they bring somebody else in? Do you think they run it back with those 2 rookies once again? And based off what we saw at the back end of the year, which was better, but still not good enough in my humble opinion. Where do you think they're at?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they better. Here's the thing. I mean, it's kind of the most interesting question of the offseason because you can hear it now. Oh, we drafted these guys.
Mm-hmm.
They got better. We're expecting a leap from year 1 to year 2. I think that's something that you worry about hearing. I think they acknowledge that they need a veteran in that room. Like the bungling of the linebacker room at every decision level from last March till Barrett. They said we're running with Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight. All the decisions in between were the biggest screw up that sent last season off the tracks. Like you can't have 2 rookies playing next to each other. I went back and tried to find it. You had to go all the way back to find any team that played 2 rookie linebackers next to each other for anywhere near the same amount as the Bengals played Carter and Knight. And I found 2013 Atlanta Falcons did it once.
Oh, how could you?
That's it. Team? Like teams don't do that. It's suicide to have 2 rookies playing next to each other that don't know what they're doing. It was an incredible challenge that was really an impossible task for those guys. So I'm not throwing out those guys. I think Knight and Carter did make progress. I think they were handed an impossible task almost to go be good playing 2 rookies next to each other. And they weren't even top pick rookies, So that said, I think there's a recognition there needs to be a real free agent in there. There's no reason they can't go get somebody. There were 7 guys last year paid between $7 and $11 million average annual value in terms of linebackers in free agency, and 5 of them finished in the top half of the NFL and PFF grade. Like you can find these guys; they'll be available again. Go find a veteran that has played, has skins on the wall, you can trust. Put him in there as kind of your number 1. And then those guys, if they get better and are better than that guy, great. Or if they're in a mix with him, great. You need the depth anyway. That is where it starts. You're going to need to add to the back of that. Probably you're going to add a 3-4 guy, someone who's like $2-3 million linebacker type to add another veteran to that room. And I think if you do that, you feel great about the status of it. Yeah, I'll buy Carter and Knight developing as long as it's alongside some veterans that are proven and bring stability.
Okay, so apologies, I might put you on the spot here. Approximately how much money do they have to work with in free agency this year, or how much money do they have available to them?
They are 8th on over the cap and effective cap space for next year. That they have that effective cap space number at $51 million, I believe. But when you do Bengals math, you end up in this Bengals math. I'll have that on the mock off-season sheet for the true Bengal number in a couple of weeks. But yeah, I mean, I think Bengals spend will probably, I'm going to guess, end up in the 30s in terms of adding up all the average annual values and cap hits, which is traditionally how they operate, obviously different than some other franchises do.
Okay, between all the money, between the draft picks, that they're certainly going to throw some more high draft picks at this defense, approximately how many new starters are on this defense next year?
Well, I guess, are you counting? I don't know if Shamar Stewart will be a starter. But if you're counting him as a new starter, because he didn't really start this year, probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, probably would be my guess.
A linebacker, a safety, the cornerbacks.
A linebacker,
kind of
a linebacker, safety, nickel corner, 2 defensive linemen. is probably where I start in terms
drastic
of
overhaul.
new starters. And they have decisions to make. Slayton and Hill are cap cut potential. I mean, they could stick with BJ Hill. But I think you could see an aggressive move where they try to go get a true disruptive 3 technique. I'm going to have a crusade over the course of this offseason that the Bengals should be trying to acquire Jeffrey Simmons from Tennessee by any means necessary.
Oh, wow.
I think he's a guy that potentially could be available as they change and they have an older guy with a bunch of money. He's got 2 years left on his deal, a true disruptive 3 technique. So my point saying that is that if you could find a way to make something like that happen, then you would move on from a BJ. You'd clear the money of BJ Hill because it's an upgrade in Slayton or whatever you would be doing to restructure. If you had an opportunity to do something bigger, that would obviously be I'm sure Bengals fans would welcome that,
sure.
right? It would
no doubt about it.
It'd be an aggressive. It would be an aggressive type of move that you would love to see them make this offseason if it was possible. And there's other things that always come up every offseason where an opportunity falls in your lap or somebody becomes available that you didn't expect that could hit them and give them pass rush juice to do an aggressive move. If something like that happened, it could, click forward some other things.
So you kind of stole this question, and it's going to be the final question I ask you. You kind of stole this from me earlier, but I held the opinion, and you mentioned this, that this offseason I'm very optimistic because it can, as you said earlier, it's simple, but they don't have distractions. They don't have to worry about Trey Hendrickson. They don't have to worry about a Jamar Chase extension. They don't have to worry about a T. Higgins extension. They don't have Joe Burrow going around and saying like, hey, I think we should bring these guys back and pushing it to where their focus can kind of be on just fixing this defense. I'm very optimistic for that reason. I don't know if you want to give me on a scale of 1 to 10, but how optimistic are you that they can solve this problem, which is the defense, because the offense is pretty much taken care of. There's a few small things, and there's not a whole lot of distractions other than just fixing this darn defense. How optimistic are you?
I mean, it's a question of trust level with the people in charge of doing it, and so I probably put it in the 6-7 range. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't use that number. I know I feel bad even having said it now.
Okay.
How about 6.5, 6.58 or something like that to avoid saying the number? I think I'm more optimistic than not. But you can't look at what's happened in recent years and where it's felt like you've seen the moves they could make and nothing like that's happened. I do think, and this goes back to the beginning, that the continuity of understanding what Al Golden is trying to do defensively and everybody seeing now what is needed, what you plan on doing with those players, what they should look like. Because I think there was a problem with that communication last year. I think that does help them in pinpointing and giving them what they need and everyone being clear on what it is that they need to upgrade that defense. Now, the execution of it, that's where I end up 3 and 4 numbers down from 10 on that. So can they do it? We'll all find. It's the beauty of sports. We'll all find out together. But I do think there is clarity in what they need to do.
Was that a Pearl Jam book behind you on the bookshelf?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's
what's your
Pearl Jam
album?
20.
What's your favorite album?
Verses.
Okay.
Probably. There's so many, but I would say that's probably the other thing. The other great thing about Pearl Jam is that you can get all the soundboards from their concerts. And so if I'm picking Pearl Jam, I usually will go and pick out shows that I've been to that compile everything. But in terms of single album, I know 10 is hard. I
was going to take chalk. I love 10.
Yeah, 10 is chalk, but there's so many Rearview Mirror, there's so many hits on Verses that I love so much. Yeah, so I could go on for that. If we want to talk more Pearl Jam, I could get the book and the albums out. We could dive into it.
Maybe some other time. What's the coolest show you've ever been to? Pearl Jam. You said you've been to a bunch.
Probably my first. I think the first one is the coolest. I saw them in Cincinnati. I don't even remember. I had to have been.
Please don't tell me it was like a Bogart show or something like that.
No, I wish. I have a good Bogart show. My favorite concert of all time was a show I saw at Bogart's, which was I saw Outkast before they really got huge.
No way.
We were at Bogart's in 1998, April of '98, I think. And it was right before like Rosa Parks and Bombs Over Baghdad kind of took over. They were still smaller, so they weren't playing huge venues. Was lucky enough to go. Coolest thing I've ever been a part of in my life. I think I still find people to this day that are like, I was at that show. It was unbelievable. I can't believe we were there. So that is my Bogarts thing. But yeah, Pearl Jam was probably the first time I saw them. I think it was probably like Riverbend or something like that, if I remember the exact place. But it was just being blown away by them in person was awesome.
Yeah, I've only seen him once. It was at Wrigley Field. It was really, really cool.
Ooh,
I get to see him again. Yeah, it was
pretty
one. Neat. Between Outkast and Pearl Jam, Paul, you've got great taste in music.
I don't know. Some people disagree, but I'll take it. I'll take it from you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic and the Growler Podcast. I'll see you later. Propaganda Paul, as he is called on the internet. See you, Paul. I'll tell you what, there, Stone. You can't get much better than Pearl Jam and Outkast. That was awesome. I was waiting for the hook. He's like, I saw so and so at Bogarts. I was like, oh, who is it? I was like, we doing like Smashing Pumpkins. Where we at with this? And he throws out Outkast, and that's about as awesome as it gets because Outkast. I mean, you can't. I mean, Andre 3K. I mean, come on, man. It's great. You're not a big Outkast guy, are you?
No, I wouldn't say that, but he's excellent. Paul Dehner is incredible. He's absolutely right. I loved how he explained your first question. Like, he's not excited. None of us are like, woohoo, we got these two guys back. Let's go. We're going to win a Super Bowl. But probably the right thing to do, the best thing to do, in my opinion. I also do think it's kind of funny, Reader, how when we get these guests on, you're like, I don't mind Zach Taylor. I'm kind of in the middle, but a Monday after a loss, you would think he's the devil.
It is. No, listen, if you watch this show, I'm a flapjack, man. I flip-flop around. There's no doubt about it. Zach Taylor, I think if it's a spectrum, I think I am more on the favor of Zach Taylor than the great majority of Bengals fans. I'm the one that gives him credit for play calling. No one else does that. And in fact, that's like the number one thing people want to get on him for. And I think his play calling is great. Because I think his play calling, I mean, other than the fake snap thing, I mean, and the timeouts thing drive me nuts. But I mean, they scored 30 points when everyone's out there. So like I'm riding the wave on that. I think I'm more pro Zach than most people are. But I can't ignore 1-8 without Joe Burrow. And listen, if Joe Burrow's hurt, it's all for naught. Right? There's I think a good adage about Peyton Manning. I forget which of his coaches, but someone came to a practice and said, why don't you ever let your backup quarterback take first team reps? And they said, well, because if Peyton's hurt, the season's done. Like if Peyton's not taking the first team reps, then what are we doing out here? And that's how it is with Joe. But I mean, 1-8 without him. I'm not asking you to be 7-1 or 8-1. I'm really not even asking you to go 5-4. Just a few more wins, and that was pretty inept. It's pretty inept, and I soured on Zach more so than I've ever. Listen, on this show, I got laughed at 2 years ago, laughed at by Tom and Elliott because I said that I'd rather have Zach Taylor be the head coach of the Bengals than Bill Belichick. It's 2026. I feel like that take looks pretty stinking good. So, I don't know. I'll admit that you're telling me right now you would rather have John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, or Matt LaFleur? No doubt about it. Maybe those are pie in the sky. That'd be like Reds fans going like, yeah, I don't want Spencer Steer. I want Shohei Ohtani. Like, yeah, maybe those are just too far-fetched to actually believe in. But at some point, I just want this organization to be a big boy organization, spend money towards a head coach, and run it back. But if the options are Zach Taylor or even a guy like Jesse Minter, I'd rather have Zach Taylor. I'd rather run it back there. I don't want someone learning on a job, what could be a pivotal year. I want someone that has done it before. And if that's not doable, if we're going to be hiring a first-time head coach, then yeah, just run it back with Zach Taylor. Make it as I try to sum it all up. Keep it simple, stupid. And I think this organization is stupid at times. So trying to keep it simple is of the utmost importance. Thank you so much to Paul Dehner Jr. Thank you, everyone that was here today. We'll have a fun show for you tomorrow. The Stone Shield Show coming up. Another hour of sports talk here in the Queen City. See you guys.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. My name is Stone Shields. It is Thursday. It is January 8th, and we are here and we are live on Chatterbox Sports. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us here this morning. Lots of stuff that we want to get to. No guest today, so it's just you and me, but lots of Bengals conversation I do want to get to. By the way, Reed Mouse, if you're just joining us, had Paul Dehner Jr. on of The Athletic during the 10 o'clock hour, and that was a great interview with Paul. Paul's so good. Probably there's a lot of great people that cover the Cincinnati Bengals. Paul's got to be at the top of the list. He's been doing it for a long time. Tremendous writer, host of the Growler podcast there, of course, as well. So that interview, Reed and Paul, that will be out on our YouTube page later this afternoon. They touched on a lot of things. They grazed free agency a little bit, but we're going to spend more of an in-depth conversation on Bengals free agency here to begin today's show, and we're going to roll through all the free agents on Cincinnati's roster here at this point, and we'll kind of give our opinions on whether or not we think those free agents should be back. The college football playoff semifinals, it returns tonight. And that is pretty exciting. We got Miami and Ole Miss. Last I look, Ole Miss 3-point underdogs to Miami. Miami -3. And that football game, kind of a surprising matchup, right? I think a lot of us expected it to be Georgia, Ohio State. And that is not the case, as upsets in both of those games. Ole Miss, Trinidad Chambliss, coming off an incredible game, one of the best college football games I have seen in my lifetime, against Georgia in the quarterfinals, and they will be playing Carson Beck, Mario Cristobal, and the Miami Hurricanes with a ferocious defense. So a really compelling game. Looking forward to that. We'll spend some time talking about that game. Also, we'll go through our NFL predictions. Of course, Saturday commences the NFL playoffs. This is always a great weekend, right? This one and then the divisional round. I think you could argue the divisional round is kind of the best week of NFL football throughout the year because you get a couple of games, and they're always really compelling. I think this year, though, the wild card might actually be a little bit better. Why? Because it feels like anybody's ball game. I mean, we really only have one quote-unquote stinker, and it, of course, is the Rams and the Panthers, but the Panthers beat the Rams earlier this year, so not very many people giving them an opportunity, but they've already done it once. Can they do it again? Have home field advantage? Los Angeles, of course, has to fly across the country, and I think that's certainly a very valid point there. So we'll talk about these games. If you remember, we did our NFL predictions before the season started, right before the season started, and I believe, so obviously there's 14 teams in the NFL playoffs. I only had 8 of them correct. Missed out on 6 of them, and we'll kind of break those down, and we'll go through our predictions for the playoffs and ultimately crown a Super Bowl champion here at the end of that segment. We'll also talk about Cliff Kingsbury. He was let go. Offense coordinator for the Washington Commanders, came back for year 2. I think there was some buzz around him as far as head coaches go and being a head coach candidate last cycle. Ultimately, he decides to stay in Washington, run it back year 2, Jaden Daniels, and just a disaster of a season for the Washington Commanders. And as time goes on, it's beginning to look like that NFC title run was a complete fluke because they've got the oldest roster in the NFL. Now their quarterback, who people wanted to crown and say he was some top 5 guy, maybe he still can be, but the worries about him getting hurt before he was drafted kind of came to fruition here in year 2 for Jaden Daniels. So the Commanders are a total mess right now. Kingsbury relieved of his duties. And look, by all accounts, Cliff Kingsbury is a nice guy, but I always feel like he is super overvalued, and I don't know quite why. Because you look at his track record, and he hasn't really had a ton of success anywhere that he has been. So we'll talk about that, and also we'll close out with some sports headlines. Xavier loses last night to Marquette. I believe it was only by 1 point. That's the thing about Xavier is you look at him playing basketball and as a roster, I mean, this team's just not very good, and they were getting dominated early in that game. But Pitino, man, guy can coach. The fact he was able to get them back in that game and give them an opportunity at the end says a lot. I'm not going to act like Marquette's a good team. Marquette, you could argue, is maybe even worse than Xavier. Certainly, that was their first Big East win. So I think there's such a total difference in coaching when you look at the 2 college basketball teams in this city with Cincinnati and Xavier. And we talked about it yesterday as Wes Miller kind of crashed out on 700 WLW after the game a couple of nights ago against West Virginia. But we'll talk a little bit about that. And also some breaking news here coming through the wire. Mike McDaniel has been fired. He's been relieved of his duties as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. It looked like, and this sometimes happens, in the NFL where it's like, no, this guy's going to keep his job. And then a couple of days go by, some more meetings, maybe some other job openings open up or some candidates become available in this case. And all of a sudden, boom, he is out. So I think it's a mistake. But if you land John Harbaugh, it's not a mistake. And we talked about how there was, it was reported yesterday, I believe, or maybe 2 days ago, that there was more people calling about John Harbaugh than there were NFL job openings. And then it came out that that team was the Miami Dolphins. Apparently there's a connection there between Harbaugh and ownership in Miami. And I don't know. That would be a home run if the Miami Dolphins could land Harbaugh. They're choosing to go in a different direction, of course, at head coach. I would imagine they're going to go in a different direction at quarterback. Not going to be able to, trade Tua, but, do you cut him? What do you do? You're going to have to just eat a lot of that salary because you just paid him. But I think especially now with a new coach coming in, you probably are in a situation where you need to find a new quarterback. And it's kind of funny. Dan Orlovsky put this out on Twitter yesterday. You kind of look at the offense and look at Miami and the guys they have. Ty Simpson seems like a pretty good fit. Obviously another Alabama quarterback there. But, the offense could look a heck of a lot different now that Mike McDaniel is gone. And I don't know. The Giants fans were in a great spot there for a second because it looked like no doubt John Harbaugh was going to be on his way to New York to be the next coach of the Giants. Now I think the Dolphins certainly enter that conversation. Does he perhaps go just to the NFC because his brother's in the AFC? Jim was joking the other day at his press conference like, hey, he's the best coach I know. Obviously, he's going to say that with him being his brother. But he was like, yeah, I just hope he goes to the NFC so we don't have to deal with him. It'd be interesting to see how that shakes out. But if the Miami Dolphins can land Harbaugh, I think they finally could get back on the right track as far as an organization goes. I feel like the Dolphins, I don't want to sit here and say they're a proud franchise because they had Dan Marino and they weren't able to turn it into a Super Bowl, but it's kind of one of those teams where it's like, if the Dolphins just could be good, I think that's good for the sport, right? It's Miami. It's a huge market. You're playing Josh Allen twice a year and, of course, the New England Patriots there as well. And I just feel like that division has kind of been so bad for so long. And if you could add a third team into the mix, because Josh Allen's always going to be a threat, and it looks like Drake May and Mike Vrabel are going to be a problem for a long time. If you could add Miami into that equation, and that could help mitigate how bad the Jets are, I think that would be positive for the sport. But that's going to be fascinating to watch. And it'll be interesting. I still think there's a chance maybe another job becomes open, even though as we get kind of later in the week here, Black Monday, several days ago. But we're here on January 8th, and a new job has become open, and that's going to be fascinating to watch. Miami, of course, still looking for a new GM there as well. But let's start with the Cincinnati Bengals, and let's start with these free agents. So we were talking about how Paul was just on with Reed Mouse earlier this morning. He released a piece. Paul's pieces in the offseason are great. He does a great job of breaking down, where the Bengals are at. These guys are free agents. Here's how the money works out, and he explains it all very, very well. But basically, he broke down all the free agents. Cincinnati has 15 unrestricted free agents, 1 restricted free agent, and kind of went through each player and kind of evaluated them and projected whether or not he thought they would be back with this team next offseason, and he gave it a % chance, is what he always does. But the Bengals currently project to have $69 million in cap space for 2026. That is 8th in effective cap space entering the offseason. And there's also a small list of potential cap cuts that could add another $5 to $15 million to the available total. And if you heard Paul on earlier, like B.J. Hill could perhaps be one of those guys, T.J. Slaton, if they really want to rework the interior of their defensive line. But the first name we'll start with is the guy that we opened our show with yesterday. And that, of course, is Trey Hendrickson. And we've all been saying it, but it was good to hear it as well from Paul Dehner Jr., who obviously is very close with the team. He said 1% chance that Trey Hendrickson is back with the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, Cincinnati, if they want, could try to execute a tag and trade. Doesn't really seem like something Cincinnati will do. I think you're in a spot where you just kind of let him walk. And then the projected comp pick would be a 2027 not 2026, 2027 third-round pick, and you certainly would take that, right? Comp pick, Trey Hendrickson, he goes on his merry way, and you're just kind of ready for that relationship to end. And, people speculated about the injury and could he have came back earlier, what have you. Kind of odd when he elected to ultimately decide to get the surgery. And Paul basically said on the show with Reed, like, that was kind of the last straw. Like, that's not the reason why the Bengals are moving on here at this point, or probably going to move on. But I think that was probably the last straw. It's like, you know what, we're ready to kind of head in a different direction here. Zach said there's always a path, but I think he kind of just, is he going to go out there, especially with Trey Hendrickson? He's going to be one of the top free agents in the NFL. And is he just going to be like, yeah, Trey's done here. He's done. No shot. He's coming back. He just kind of left it simple. There's always a path. There is a path, but it's not a path I don't think you want to go down if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, let's say you went on a playoff run this year and lost in the AFC title game again. Then maybe you're like, shoot, maybe we bring him back. But when you're in a spot where he wasn't available and it was a disaster on defense and you didn't even come close to making the playoffs, I think you cut bait, you move on, you let him go to a different team, and you appreciate him for his services because he did. Overall, when you look at his career here in Cincinnati, lots of drama in the off seasons. Says some head-scratching things at times, but the production was unbelievable. And I've said it a million times on the show. I'll say it again. The greatest signing in Bengals free agent history. Joseph Ossai. I think some people out there might be a little bit split. I'm not. I was not in favor of giving him the prove-it deal. Somebody, just given his age and some of the production he has, is going to give him upwards of $10 million per year. And that's not something Cincinnati could do. This is the point I've been trying to hammer home for so long. Is the Bengals, what the worry is they'll look at the free agent market and go, two of the top free agents in the NFL are Joseph Ossai and Trey Hendrickson. Let's just keep him here. That can't happen. We've ran that experiment for several years now, and it hasn't worked out. I appreciate Joseph Ossai's effort, but there's not much reason for me to believe that it is going to equate to more production. I think he is who he is here at this point, and that means he's a fine NFL player. But the Bengals are in need of somebody that could potentially be a 1 or a really, really good 2, because you look at their team right now, assuming Trey Hendrickson is out the door, we like the progress of Myles Murphy. Can we crown him a 1? Absolutely not, right? He's a 2. Joseph Ossai, I think 2 is being a little bit generous, right? Cam Sample, Cedric Johnson. I like Cedric Johnson a lot, but none of these guys are high-end 2s, or certainly not 1s either. I just don't see Ossai. I think he is who he is at this point. And I think some of the injury stuff is a little bit of a concern. I think maybe it cost himself a little bit of money not being able to play the last couple of games. Appreciate his services, but that was a pick where it's like that didn't really pan out. Again, this was the best year that he's had. The 1-year prove-it deal that they gave him didn't blow up in Cincinnati's face by any means, but just going forward with him as a player on this team, I don't think he really fits into what they're trying to do defensively. And new bodies, new faces, enough of this, these guys will get better. No, you were in the league for several years, right? I mean, you played through your rookie contract, and you got a 1-year deal with Cincinnati. It's time to move on. Appreciate the effort. Time to move on. Head in a different direction. Somebody's going to give him too much money, and it better not be the Cincinnati Bengals. Geno Stone. Now, Paul in his piece, again, he does the percentages. I forgot to say with Joseph Ossai. I think he put 20% on Joseph Ossai, 1% on Trey Hendrickson. Geno Stone, he put 15%, which I was a little bit surprised that it was that high. Now, for the record, to be very clear, it should be 0%. There's not a world where Cincinnati should bring back Geno Stone. It's just interesting because when you look at his first couple of years in the league under his rookie contract with the Baltimore Ravens, he was a 3 as far as the safety goes. And if Geno Stone was a 3 or a 4, I don't think we had the same feelings as a fan base that we do towards Geno Stone. But he was out there as the 1 for Cincinnati at that safety spot, continued to play bad, and stayed at the 1. So that's why there's so much pent-up frustration with him as a football player here in this city. I don't think you can come back from that, even if you bring in a couple of new safeties and say, yeah, we'll keep Geno on the roster. No, it didn't work. You brought him in for 2 years. You stuck with him way too long. I will never understand when you reflect on these Bengals seasons, right? The 2022 year, just so close in the title game. The Super Bowl, Logan Wilson, oh my God, so close, right? When you look back on this past season and really the past 2 seasons, I will never understand why Geno Stone played as much as he did. The coaching staff has given him praise for organizing the defense, for keeping everybody on the same page, but the angles were not good enough. The speed and the athleticism certainly isn't good enough. The tackling isn't good enough. And in my opinion, the effort isn't good enough. I guess that wasn't an issue with the coaching staff, right? Because if you had a lack of effort, I don't think you would continue to play. But to me, it looked like lack of effort frequently with Geno Stone, and the team continued to roll him out there on a weekly, gamely basis, and he was basically playing 100% of the snaps. I don't understand it. Paul says 15%. I don't think like Geno Stone should be a salesman necessarily, right? But he shouldn't be starting on an NFL team. He's good enough to be on the roster probably. But at the end of the day, Baltimore picked him in the 6th or the 7th round. It was a late day 3 pick, and he was a nice piece for them. Wasn't a starter. And then Cincinnati thought they found something. It was like, oh, we can bring this guy in here on a team-friendly deal and have him start. Then you look at his contract. I believe initially it was 2 years, 14, and then they restructured it, and he made less this year. But that was a complete waste. He certainly did not live up to that contract at all. Paul says 15. I don't disagree with him, but I think it definitely should be 0. Cam Taylor-Britt, 20%. This is a guy that has gotten benched several times throughout his career in the NFL with different staffs, by the way. Anarumo's staff and then Golden's staff this year. You had the off-the-field stuff, which isn't good, right? If you're entering a contract year and you're going to mess around and find yourself in a position where you're going to jail, right? We're sitting here on January 8th. Cam Taylor-Britt's in jail, all right? Because he was driving recklessly without a license. Now, I don't get that at all. That's not the reason why I think he should be gone. I think he should be gone just purely from a football perspective. But what are you doing, right? You're an NFL player, 2nd-round pick, making millions of dollars, and you're going to be an idiot after the game. I don't understand that, and you've seen immaturity issues be a problem for him consistently. And look, now luckily for the Bengals, that looks like they found something there at the cornerback spot. And maybe, Dax Hill and DJ Turner aren't as good as maybe we think. Maybe they regress next year, whatever. But especially with how bad the defense is, those guys should be starters for you next year, and you should hope they can play as many snaps as they did this year, and you move forward trying to build your defense around those two guys. Cam Taylor-Britt, they tried him at nickel for a second. That didn't really work. Right, people were speculating maybe try him at safety because he can hit people really hard and does have really good ball skills. That never really happened for Cincinnati. He belongs on the outside, but frankly, he's just not good enough. And I think whoever signs him, he's probably going to be that 3. Maybe some team takes a chance on him and hopes he can, still be a 1 or a 2 and a starter on the outside. But if the Bengals were to bring him back, it wouldn't be as a 1 or a 2. It would be as that 3rd cornerback. Now, look, Bengals next year, they were very fortunate with their health at corner with DJ and Dax this year. I don't know if you can bank on that, hopefully, but I don't think you can safely bank on that going forward. They're going to need Fig Newton or somebody else that they bring in or draft to step up. But I just think it's ran its course. He's gotten benched several different times, several different staffs. He was a healthy scratch, if you remember. I think that was the Pittsburgh game, perhaps. It was around there in the year. And, credit to him, he always responded in the right way, and the coaches never really said anything bad about him, but I'm just done. And, we talk about Trey not speeding to come back to injury kind of being the final straw. I mean, maybe him going to jail is the final straw, right? Maybe him going to jail is the final straw. But Paul Dehner says 20%. Again, that's a fair number. I would hope it's a little bit less than that. Noah Fant. Noah Fant has had a really solid career in the NFL coming into this past year. If you remember, he was involved with the Russell Wilson trade between Denver and Seattle, had some good moments, and he always protected the football until this year. But the Bengals had, I believe, 9 touchdowns that they gave up while they had the ball on offense, which, like I've said this before on the show, that's like a foundational principle of why your season went as badly as it did. Like, that is absurd. That is absolutely absurd. You played 17 games and 9 times the opposition scoring when you have the ball offensively. That's horrible. 3 of those times was Noah Fant. Can't happen. Fumble, scoop score the other way. I mean, that flips a game on its head. And we saw it really do that, right? Because the Bengals had, given up the touchdown offensively earlier in the game, and then, boom, fumble. I think it was on first down, too, and then you're looking up like, how the heck? We had this great plan. We were going to run the ball. It's working. And you look up and you're down 8 points to Cleveland, and Shedeur Sanders had like 2 first downs, right? That's unacceptable, and it can't happen. And I think that's pretty damning on his season, right? And beyond that, I don't think he did a ton. The Bengals are always going to just kind of reload at tight end. They still have some guys in that room, which we'll get to, but we've seen it in the Joe Burrow era, right? You just put in somebody with, some level of competence, and you're going to be able to go out there and be productive on the offensive side of the football at that tight end spot, Irv Smith Jr. is really the only exception. That didn't really work for Cincinnati, but basically every other tight end you throw out there has worked for the Cincinnati Bengals. And it'll be interesting to see Eric Hall come back. If you remember, Eric Hall out of Michigan was at Iowa too. The Bengals took him in the 4th round. In the moment, I was like, it seems a little early. That seems a little bit aggressive when they took him. And then he came in as a rookie, and he was playing that kind of fullback position too, sometimes lining up in the I formation. He was blocking. He was catching passes. It looked great, but he had all the injuries in college, and then he had a huge injury in the NFL. I think he tore his ACL twice, maybe. I think he was rehabbing it and then tore it again, something along those lines, but it cost him the entirety of last year. And it'll be interesting to see how he responds coming back. He's going to get an opportunity. The people within the organization absolutely love him. And you add him back to a tight end room that already has Drew Sample and already has Mike Gesicki. There's your blocking tight end. There's your pass-catching tight end. So, to me, like Noah Fant, even if he didn't have the fumbles, I'm not looking to bring back. But that, again, kind of the last straw for him. 10%, according to Paul Dehner Jr. Now we finally get into a guy here where it's like, okay, let's talk about him potentially coming back, and that, of course, is Dalton Risner. 75%, according to Paul Dehner Jr. Risner was brought in super late, off the street. And Lucas Patrick, who, was kind of starting at that right guard spot to begin the year, and we all were like, Lucas Patrick, what are we doing here? And then he immediately gets hurt in the Week 1 game against Cleveland. Risner comes in, and then, when they had the quarterback issues, they kind of threw Rivers in there, the 5th-round rookie, just like, all right, let's see what we have in him. And then, I think it was the latter stages of Flacco, perhaps, and certainly when Joe Burrow was back, they went back to Risner. I don't know the particular game off the top of my head. I'll have to check that. But he was great. He came in and he was tremendous. He's a veteran player, he's played a lot of football, and I think that was the best year of his career. I mean, there's a reason he was available as late in free agency as he was. This wasn't some great offensive lineman, but he had a great year. And again, Joe Burrow raises everybody's ability, and that includes the offensive line. It's not just tight ends, running backs, and wide receivers. I think the offensive line oftentimes can get better with Joe Burrow being out there. And even though they get a lot of, crap for him taking all the hits he has, I think this year you look at him and it's like, well, Burrow's out there. They were playing really good football, and I think there's something to be said about that. But there's already been guys along the offensive line, Ted Karras and Amarius Mims, that are banging the table saying, hey, we need Dalton Risner to come back. We want him to come back. And I think they're on that right side with Mims. And then Karras was hanging in there at center too. That was really, really awesome to see. That right side was locked down with Risner and Amarius Mims. Mims is just going to continue to get better. I've said, besides the big three, he might be my favorite player on the team. I absolutely love that guy, and he's tremendous. Bengals hit that out of the park. But, in order for him to be at his best, right, he needs somebody competent next to him. And that's partially why Dalton Risner probably was so good, because Amarius Mims was so good next to him there as well. So that right side there with Karras at that center position, it might be something you want to run back. We talk about how Joe Burrow was banging the table last offseason. Jamar, Mike G, Trey Hendrickson, bring them all back. Is he going to be doing that for a guy like Dalton Risner? Maybe. He hasn't to this point, not to my knowledge. He certainly has been very appreciative and has shouted out his offensive line, has called it the best offensive line of his career to this point. But those guys, Mims and Karras, certainly want him back. And I think that's something that Cincinnati should experiment with, tap into, right? And Risner was vocal that he wants to be back. He loves it here in Cincinnati. And he doesn't want to do what he's done the past few years where, waits super long before he's on a team. He's ready to get this thing done right here, right now before free agency. And we'll see. Now, Cincinnati notoriously hasn't really valued that guard spot. I think you can get him on a pretty friendly deal, right? I don't think there's going to be some team out there in free agency that throws a ton of cash at Dalton Risner. Again, get it done early if you're Cincinnati. If you want him to come back, get it done now, right? Get it done as quickly as you can. Don't mess around with this thing and let other teams get involved. Do it right now. He wants to be here, right? Now, if you don't want him to be here, that's fine. Let him move on. But don't sign him late, right? And then you're probably paying more money than what you need to. Get it done as quickly as you can if you want him to be here. I'm not opposed to him coming back. Paul Dehner says 75%. Tanner Hudson, 90%. Fine, right? I don't have an issue with that. The role, I think he understands his role, and he's been really good within that role. And I don't think if you're Tanner Hudson, you don't want to go play with somebody else not named Joe Burrow. Like, Tanner Hudson has a job probably against Joe Burrow, right? And, Joe clearly trusts him. Third down, he goes to him on third down. He made some really nice plays. The play on Thanksgiving against Baltimore was tremendous. And you're not going to have to pay him a ton of money. And again, he's like that really tight end 4, right? Like, bring him back on a team-friendly deal and pay him a ton of money. He can be that tight end 4 there with Eric All. I'm not opposed to having 4. We'll see what Cincinnati does going forward. They've mixed around a little bit how many tight ends they keep, but being a 3 or 4 and just, a cheap deal, yeah, sure, bring back Tanner Hudson. Now the quarterbacks. Joe Flacco. Paul puts him at 33%. This one's very interesting to me. And it's unfortunate that it's interesting because the only reason it's interesting is because Joe Burrow seemingly always gets hurt. But I think the Bengals should really prioritize bringing back Joe Flacco. I really do. Now, there might be another team out there that is looking for that quote-unquote bridge guy. Based on what you saw when Joe Flacco was the starter, I understand he came back down to earth a little bit at the end of his tenure as a starter here in Cincinnati, but understand that AC joint was messed up. Like, he was hurting, and he was still able to gut it out for the team. So I think if he's 100% or close to it, he ends it pretty strong, too, the way he started it here in Cincinnati, and it would be hard. I mean, there's so many teams across the league, so many different teams where it's like they're in trouble at quarterback. Like, they could just bring Joe Flacco in here for a year, right? You're not going to win the Super Bowl with him, but you can win some games with him and then kind of move on. Clearly, Joe Flacco, he's not retiring. He said that. Clearly, he wants to have another crack at being a starter. You could argue he deserves it there as well. But, I mean, if you're the Bengals, right, and not to say, and look, it's very clear, if 9 goes down again, cooked. Right, 9 goes down again, cooked. But there are rare instances where you can hang on with the backup. And if it was a situation like we had this past year, imagine if Joe Flacco was here from the jump and is playing that Minnesota game right away. Like, maybe the Bengals are playing a game this weekend, if that's the case. So having him is invaluable. I think he was great. And, if you have him, he's like the best backup in the league, right, if you have Joe Flacco. And I think that's a position that you need to value when you have Joe Burrow, right? Like Josh Allen in Buffalo, I don't think Buffalo really needs to value a backup as much as Cincinnati does because Josh Allen's always available, right? Love Joe Burrow to death. It's not his fault. But, having a valuable, good, competent backup here in Cincinnati is important. And you got one in Joe Flacco. Now, if another team says we want him to be the starter, you're not going to pay that type of salary. But if not, you're in a good spot. Bring him back. Browning, 8%. I think the only reason it's 8 is because he's well-respected within the team, the organization, the locker room, the staff. He cost himself maybe a job. People talk about, backup quarterback in the National Football League, best job you could have. I don't know if you could, I don't know if Jake Browning can bank on that after how much of a disaster this past year was. What's going for him is that he still has the 23 tape. That was positive. Lots of teams like experience. He has experience. But his times as a backup in the NFL, I think, have come to an end. I think, for him, he's kind of that 3, and he might get one more opportunity to play in the NFL, and he's got to deliver if he wants to hang on to his job. 8%, I'm ready to move on. Bringing back Jake Browning does nothing for me. 8% according to Paul. A guy that we haven't talked about in months, maybe even a year, to be honest with you, and that is Cordell Volson. Cordell Volson, of course, got hurt early. I think it was in camp, maybe the preseason. Shoulder injury, out for the year. Haven't heard from him. Paul lists this at 40%. He's played a ton of football for Cincinnati. And Scott Peters, mind you, offensive line coach for the Bengals, when he got the job, he was talking about, he was excited to work with Cordell Volson, and it never really materialized because Cordell, of course, got hurt. I'm not opposed to bringing him back as a rotational piece. Having too many offensive linemen is not a problem. In fact, it's a very good thing. I think if Cordell Volson's your guy week 1 next year, you don't want that, right? But, the Bengals along the offensive line this year, pretty dang healthy, right? Pretty dang healthy along the offensive line. Again, same. Offensive line, corner, that's not going to happen next year. 2 years in a row would be very unlikely. So having some depth there would help them out. As far as a backup goes, sure, bring him in, compete for a role. Not have him as a starter. Not going to have to pay him a ton of money. Cordell Volson, I'm open to bringing him back. Paul has it at 40%. JD, Jalen Davis, 90%. It's not a coincidence that ever since Jalen Davis was inserted in the lineup there at that nickel spot, the Bengals defense rose to another level. He's been with this organization for a long time, practice squad. He just gets it. His knowledge of the game, he's been around. He's a gutsy dude. All right, but there's a reason why he's a practice squad guy, and there's a reason why that, he hasn't been able to hang on to a starting spot in the NFL for a long time because, the speed and the size and the strength are, not NFL starter caliber stuff. But he can make up with it with his knowledge for the game, his work ethic, and just that, dog mentality. Certainly that's something Mike Hilton possessed as well for Cincinnati. But Paul's got it at 90%. Do whatever you can to bring him back. You don't want to say, oh, we're going into 26 and Jalen Davis is our starting nickel. No, but have him on the roster, sure. Have him on the practice squad, sure. I don't know if you're going to be able to stash him on the practice squad. It's honestly surprised me that you've been able to do it for as long as you have. But after the production this year, I don't know if you can do it again. Somebody might swoop him up. But I would love to have JD on the roster. 90%. Should be something easy to get done. And I think he enjoys it here and would like to say a Cincinnati Bengal. Tycen Anderson, this one's interesting. 55% according to Paul Dehner Jr. We've all loved him on special teams. I think special teams, as far as coverage goes, is getting a little bit less important, certainly as the rules change with the new kickoff rules, and then teams in the NFL now are punting less than they ever have before. So that kind of diminishes his value a little bit. Clearly the Bengals don't like him at safety at all. We saw him get some time at safety at the end of the year. It did not go well. He played better against Cleveland than he did against Arizona, I believe was the opponent. But do you bring him back just for that special teams role and maybe a third or fourth safety? A coin flip, right? That's kind of why Paul has it at 55%. He's great on special teams. He's your ace on special teams. Do you want to keep him around for that? I'm sure Darren Simmons will have a lot of say there. I think we all were hoping we could get maybe something out of him at the safety spot. Ultimately, we did not. I don't think we can expect that to change. But do you keep him if you can get him on a cheap deal for a special teams perspective? I think that's something you should be open to. Lucas Patrick, last one here, 47% according to Paul Dehner Jr. That was your offensive line signing, right? And you did it late in free agency last year, and we're all like, we're looking around, it's like, oh, this guy's been a journeyman, kind of a backup, and he's going to be a starting offensive lineman for Joe Burrow. And, wasn't good in camp, wasn't good in the preseason, gets hurt right away in Cleveland, and, didn't really do much after that. He's your backup center, which I think provides some value. Ted Karras has been so durable for this team, and he got better, too, as the year went on, I think. So that was good to see, but you need to have someone that can be a backup center. Matt Lee, we haven't really heard much from him, 7th-round pick out of Miami a couple of years ago. So I think there is some value there with Patrick being a backup. It all depends on what kind of contract you can get him. Again, the fact they went into the last year with him as a starter was crazy, and you don't want to have that happen again. But a backup guy that now has some knowledge of the system, being with Scott Peters last year, fine to bring him back. But, if I'm picking Cordell Volson or Lucas Patrick, I'm probably going to say Cordell Volson personally, which I know Lucas Patrick was going to beat Cordell out anyway for the job last year, even if Cordell was able to stay healthy. But there's just a part of me that is just a little bit – the way – if you go back to the way Scott Peters was talking about Cordell Volson, there was something that really piqued my interest there and my curiosity. And I just kind of wanted to see what that looked like with Peters and Volson, and we never got to see it. So there's just a part of me that wants to see. I'm a little curious there. But if I'm picking, I'd probably say Volson. But if you get both of those guys back as backups, I think that's fine if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that's absolutely fine. But that'll kind of round it out there. There's a lot of guys that you're ready to move off of, right? You should move off a lot of guys. You went 6-11, right? And you've missed playoffs 3 years in a row, right? You should move off a lot of these guys. That's kind of what frustrated us with this free agent cycle last offseason, where it's like, yeah, the defense sucked. And it's like, yeah, let's bring back Ossai and B.J. Hill. And, those guys weren't awful, but it's like you can't – what do they say? The definition of stupidity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right? Like, what are you doing, right? Make a change. Go with somebody else. And we'll do cut candidates going forward. I do think that's interesting that Paul brought up B.J. Hill as a potential cut candidate because clearly you have to retool the interior of your defensive line there as well. But Dalton Reisner, I think, is the name if you had to pick one where a lot of fans are like, yes, let's get this guy back on the team and move forward with him certainly in 2026. All right, moving on here. We got about 20 minutes left in the show. I want to briefly touch on this college football playoff game tonight, and then we will roll through our NFL playoff predictions. First off, credit to college football understanding their lane, right? It's the NFL. It's the NFL wild card. We've all talked about. We were talking about this with Bill Rabinowitz earlier in the week. Got to fix the calendar. The calendar's a mess, right? But where things are at right now, like your playoff is lining up with the NFL playoffs. You're not going to compete with that. I don't care how good your games are. I don't care how much you love college football, and there are not many people that love college football more than me, but you're not competing with Wild Card Weekend. They understand that. They said, yeah, that's fine. We'll take Thursday, Friday. NFL, you take the weekend. We'll take Thursday, Friday. And I think they're going to do great numbers tonight in the game between Miami and Ole Miss. And, it's interesting, right? Both these teams pulling off huge upsets to get to this point. I think I was so excited to see Georgia, Ohio State. I thought that was going to be the game of the year. And then neither one of those teams actually are playing in this game. From an Ole Miss perspective, we talked about this going into the Georgia game. I think their one avenue for victory was Chambliss has to lose his mind and go crazy. And that's exactly what happened. And we talked about him now becoming, what he did. That's a legendary performance. I'm not overstating that here. When you do that in a playoff game, especially with the turmoil of losing your head coach, and you go out there, you put the team on your back, you make incredible plays, escaping the pocket, extending, third and long situations, going toe-to-toe with Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. He will be a legend in Oxford forever, regardless of what happens tonight. But can you do that again, right? Can you do that again against a better defense? The Kirby defense, we talked about them earlier in the year, that Georgia defense, it didn't start out great, right? But they just got better and better. Glenn Schumann company, their DC, got better and better as the year went on. And then you get to, the end of the year, certainly when you played Arch Manning in Texas, and then when you played Alabama, it's like, oh, this defense is the real deal. And he was able to overcome that. Chambliss play well in the game. Now, this Miami defense, totally different animal. Totally different animal. Now, Ohio State shot themselves in the foot frequently in that game, but also Miami made a ton of plays defensively. And you kind of heard about, this defensive line, there's allegedly all these NFL players scattered amongst them. And I think a lot of us were like, okay, what are you going to do against Ohio State? Like, is this, you going to show you're the real deal? They absolutely did. Ruben Bain off the edge. They got guys in the interior there as well. I mean, that defense is absurd. And make no mistake, Ole Miss, I don't think, can win this game if Chambliss is mediocre to not good. Right? He's got to play really well again. Now, he might. I definitely give Ole Miss the quarterback advantage in this game. The experience. Well, both guys got experience. Chambliss, of course, was really just at the Division II level, but Carson Beck has a ton of experience, and we'll see which quarterback ultimately plays better in this game. I don't know about the number. I would imagine Miami is going to come out victorious here. I kind of go back and forth on Cristobal because he does some dumb stuff, but then again, it's like, well, he's winning some of these games, and beating Ohio State the way they did is huge. Is absolutely huge. And is Carson Beck going to be able to follow up that performance as well? Because in the first game against A&M, it was super windy at Kyle Field that day, and they kind of were like, all right, we're just not going to let Carson Beck lose this game for us. And that was their plan, and it worked. And then they had to ask him to do a lot more against Ohio State, and he showed a lot of toughness. He kind of played like a bad dude in that game. He played like a bad dude in that game, and that was impressive to watch. Say what you want about Carson Beck. From a football perspective, I think he gets criticized maybe a little bit too much for the shortcomings at Georgia. I thought he was pretty dang good. Georgia receivers led the country in drops. One of those years he was the starter, so I think he gets a little bit too much criticism for that. But when you couple it with, some of his decisions off the field, it kind of makes him an easy target, certainly. But what he was able to do with his legs is the reason why, one of the main reasons why Miami won, picking up first downs on third down, using his legs, showing his toughness, and made some big-time throws in the game as well. So I think now that he has 2 playoff wins, I think you might see him play with, a lot of confidence here. I mean, beating Ohio State, that is going to do a ton for Miami. Because Miami was kind of, at first, they were like, kind of felt like, happy to be here. We had an opportunity to go on the road here against A&M, see what we're made of. We think we should be here, but, we kind of got fortunate. Right? And then they beat A&M, and then they're like, well, we got, the giant right here. We got the defending champs. How are we going to look? And they went out there and dominated that game. Pretty safe to say. We won by 10, but kind of domination, really, for 60 minutes. Now they're like, shoot, we can win the title. They're favorites in this game. They're going to be playing with an all-time confidence here. We'll see if they're able to capitalize on it. But I think that certainly speaks volumes there as well. Beck's going to have to make throws. We understand that, but, they're going to rely on their identity too, and that's playing defense, hitting guys hard, trying to limit the time of possession for Ole Miss and Chambliss and company, and that, I think, should be enough to get them a victory in this game. Now, beyond it, no, but it should be enough to get them a spot in the national title game. And it's funny because we sat here and at the beginning of the year, I was like, you know what? I think we always talk about Miami, and it's like, well, are they actually for real? I think, wanting Miami, kind of talked about this with the Dolphins at the beginning of the show, like college football, like it's just we need Miami to be good. Like college football is better when Miami's good, and we kind of trick ourselves into, this might be the year for Miami, and then it ends up not happening. Well, we said that at the beginning of this year, and then they dropped 2 games, and then we're like, Notre Dame should be in, right? And now, shoot, they're a game away from the national title, so I got to give them a lot of credit for that. Ole Miss, I don't think there's many avenues that they can win, right? It's kind of the inverse of Miami in the Ohio State game, because I was like, there's really only one path to victory for Miami in this game against Ohio State, dominating the trenches. Well, that's what happened. Now they go into this game against Ole Miss, and it kind of feels like Ole Miss only has one path to victory, and that's, shambles. You got to lose your mind again and play exceptional. But we'll see. Pete Golding, is this magic going to run out? Feels like it's only a matter of time. Like, if they got to the national title, that would be absurd. Right? I mean, if Ole Miss wins this game, that would be insane. And Lane Kiffin ought to be kicking himself right now, but he just looks like an idiot if the Ole Miss gets to the national title game and wins tonight. Not predicting that'll happen. I think they lose tonight. I think the magic runs out. But just all the staff stuff, like they got guys coming and going. Kiffin's like, no, I need our guys back here at LSU, which I sort of get it, right? It's portal. You got to build your team. That's your job for next year. The calendar's a complete mess. But the way that Ole Miss has been able to navigate this, got to give Keith Carter, their AD, a lot of credit here, because a lot of people were banging on him for, how he handled Kiffin's exit and, standing firm, not letting him coach, whatever. But he looks like he's clearly on the right side and Kiffin clearly on the wrong side here at this point. But comes down to the quarterback, right? He's a special cat. He's got to prove it again in the game tonight if Ole Miss wants to have a chance. All right, let's go through our NFL predictions for the playoffs. Now, to be very clear here, this is, I've only been doing the show, obviously, here. This is my first year doing the show here. But it feels like throughout my life, like you always do it, like with your buddies, right? You're before the playoffs, even if you're just yourself, like, all right, who's going to win these games, and try to, predict. And usually don't get all the games right, but, frequently, I've been picking the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sitting there, I was looking at the playoffs, I'm like, probably Chiefs, right? And for the most part, that's worked out. Certainly over the course of the past few years, and people were picking on me because I kind of stayed on the Chiefs for as long as I could. I'm not a Chiefs fan. If you're here in Cincinnati, you don't got a lot of love for them, but I do have a lot of respect for them. And it took me a little bit longer than some others to hop off the Chiefs and be like, okay, they're cooked this year. So anyway, they're not in it, and it feels like you look at this field, and it's like, every team not named Carolina, I think you make a case they win the Super Bowl. I really do think that. And there's some teams, when you look at these gambling lines, that, the value, I get the Packers are the 7th seed. They haven't won a game in over a month, but the value for them is like $2,500. Like, ooh. That's good odds for a team, with Jordan Love, and they don't have Micah Parsons. They have injuries. That defense is still really good. So I think this thing is wide open, and it doesn't take a genius to tell you that. But we did our predictions before the year, who would make the playoffs, and kind of did our bracket from there. I'll be open. I'll be honest. I'll be transparent. If you're new here to the show, 14 teams, obviously. Got 8 of them correct. Bills, Chargers, Texans, Steelers, Eagles, Rams, Packers, Niners correct. And then the teams that I missed on were Chiefs, Bengals, Ravens, Buccaneers, Lions, Commanders. And, very close to certainly if Tyler Loop can execute. The Ravens are in, but then, of course, the Steelers are out. Buccaneers felt like they had it for a while and then just ran out of juice. I think they fired their OC. I think Bowles is coming back. Kind of getting on a side tangent here, but you never know. Kind of what Miami did, right? We thought he was back, and then, boom, he gets fired today. But those are, just kicking myself for the Commanders. I think I just, I wasn't all the way in on, Jaden Daniels, top 5 guy. I get he was hurt. But, just looking back at that, it's like clearly that was pretty fluky. They're firing their OC, and, they're in a spot where if Dan Campbell misses the playoffs, he's getting fired too. And then they're back to being the lowly Washington Commanders. But let's roll through these games here. Jaguars, Bills, all these games are great, really. But I think, to me, that might be my favorite one. Jags, Bills, because I think the winner has an opportunity to win again after that. But Jags are 1.5 underdogs at home. It's time to recognize that they're a really good football team. And it's funny because they played the Patriots when Tom Brady cut open his hand. And, the documentary came out, and the pictures of that are crazy, how bad, like his skin just completely ripped. But that kind of, even though Jacksonville had plenty of opportunities to win that game and had a chance there at the end, but that team, it didn't really feel like belonged there. If you told me the Jags were in the AFC title game this year, I'd say they belong. They absolutely belong. So it's time to, forget the logo, forget the brand, forget the history. It's a good football team. And I've got them beating the Buffalo Bills. I think they're clearly the better team. And I would argue they're better coached, too. Liam Cohen's done a heck of a job year one with the Jaguars. And not bad for a small market team, as Sean Payton liked to point out there. But I got them winning here at home. If Allen's Superman in this game, that's the thing about Allen is he hasn't won a Super Bowl yet or played in a Super Bowl yet, but he hasn't had a bad game in the playoffs really either. He always plays great. Wouldn't be surprised if you get the best out of Josh Allen in this game, which might be enough to will his team to victory in itself. But I'll go with the Jags here. Home dog, plus 1.5. I'll take them to pull off the upset and win that game. Chargers, Patriots, talk about teams only having, a couple of different ways they can win or one way they can win. Like, they just need Harbaugh to out-coach Vrabel in this game, which is a possibility. I mean, the coaching matchup, Harbaugh and Vrabel, and that's absurd, right? And then Herbert's got to be exceptional, right? Because they got injuries all over the place. Their defense certainly better than it has been over the course of the past few years, but they've got some guys banged up on that side of the ball, that offensive line, backups everywhere. If New England scores a lot of points in this game, I don't know if the Chargers have a chance, but they just want to, find a way to stick around late and apply some pressure on Drake May. That's going to be a reoccurring theme here because some of these top dogs, these top seeds, Drake May, he hadn't been here. How's he going to look 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter down a field goal? Was he going to be able to execute? How about Bo Nix, right? How's he going to do? Sam Darnold, 5 minutes down a field goal, 5 minutes tie game. How are those guys going to play? You can safely assume like Mahomes and that's fine, play well, right? Lamar Jackson probably going to play well. Joe Burrow going to play well. These younger guys in the playoffs, it's different, man. It's different. We talked about this earlier in the week. I get it's 100 yards and whatever, how wide it is, and 60 minutes. It's technically the same. It ain't the same in the postseason. How are these guys going to respond to that? But I like New England in the spot to win. I don't know about cover the number, but I like them to win. May, you could argue, is the MVP of the league. I would vote for Stafford, but May was tremendous here in year two. Vrabel's great as well. They're not a fluky team. I think the Denver's more fluky than the Patriots just because I feel good about that operation offensively. And McDaniels, how many games like this is he prepared for? Talk about the lack of experience for Drake May. Well, how about his two guys working with him? Vrabel, as a player, certainly has been in these moments in this city forever. And McDaniels, this is nothing to Josh McDaniels. This is his happy place, right? He's ready to go. So I got the Patriots winning this game. Texans, Steelers. I think this game's going to be awesome. I really do. I've said it a bunch of times on the show. We don't like Pittsburgh here in Cincinnati. It doesn't mean I can't appreciate Aaron Rodgers playing quarterback. The fact he's in the playoffs, I think, is great. I think it's going to be an ugly game, right? Pittsburgh going to need their crowd to be a big-time difference, which certainly it could. It's going to be a crazy environment there. The ugly, terrible towels are going to be waving. Monday Night Football. But that Texans defense, man, it's just incredible. I think they're going to get after Rodgers. I think they're going to hit him a little bit in this game. Pittsburgh's offense has been very let's get it out of his hands quickly type stuff. It's going to change maybe a little bit with DK coming back, but depending on who Houston puts on him, Stingley can eliminate him from the game. I think that very well could happen. So it's going to be a low-scoring game, you would think, and I just think that Houston defense is too good. They're too good not to win a playoff game. Give me the Houston Texans getting it done. Rams beat the Panthers. Positive year for the Panthers. I think there should be some conversations going forward about, a team that didn't even have a winning record and they're hosting a playoff game. Should that be the case? I don't know. We don't have to fully get into it here on today's show, but something about that doesn't seem right. Credit to them, right? It's the Panthers, right? We talk about these teams that we make fun of that are so bad. Shoot, we got the Panthers and the Jaguars in the playoffs. Crazy, right? I give Bryce Young a lot of credit for facing adversity. After the benching, he played solid this year. Now, unfortunately for him, he was the number 1 overall pick, so he's never going to live up to that expectation. But he looked like a starter in the NFL, I think, and I think he earned himself, a job being the starter there next year. I do. And Canales, I'm not a Canales guy, but credit to him. They won the division, but the road ends against the Rams. Maybe the Panthers cover. I don't know, but Rams win. Packers going to Soldier Field. I like Green Bay in this spot. I like them a lot. When the Bears got him, it was fluky. I don't think they get him if Jordan Love stays healthy. They hit the bomb there at the end to win it. Elite moment, electric moment. But the Bears defensively I don't think are good enough, and I expect Caleb Williams to struggle a little bit here. Ben's going to help him out. Ben Johnson's going to do the best he can. He's going to have a great plan. But LaFleur's going to have these boys locked in. There's this dialogue out there that he might be coaching for his job. I think that's ridiculous. Granted, hand up, I didn't expect Harbaugh to get fired either. But, if they lose to the Jags and McDermott gets fired, I don't think that would surprise people, right? But if LaFleur loses to the Bears and he gets fired, to me, that would shock me. I don't think it's going to happen, though. I think they win. I get they haven't won in a month plus. But Jordan Love, if he's healthy, he's had some issues with that a little bit, certainly. But I'm expecting him to play really well in this game. Expect him to play better than Caleb Williams. I think Green Bay gets the win. I don't think it's their last win either, by the way. Niners, Eagles, this one's tough. I've gone back and forth on this. The line's 4.5. Usually when Vegas does 4.5, that's their way of saying, look, Philadelphia's going to win this game. Because of, Vegas wants it to be 3.5. If you're going 4.5, they probably feel good about Philly winning. But I'm going to go the other way here. Not a best bet of the weekend, but give me the Niners here in this spot. Purdy, I think, if you didn't watch the game against Seattle, you go, 3 points, he must have sucked. No, I thought Purdy was fine in the game. I thought he played really well, actually, in the game, despite they only scored 3 points. Are you a little bit worried about his health? Maybe. He hit his hand there at the end of the game. But I think Philadelphia is comfortable in the spot. I expect Hurts to play well. But I don't know. Can Salah show up and, get that group together? I mean, they gave up 13 points to Seattle. They got a lot of breaks there in that game. But I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if Shanahan just outclasses Sirianni in this game on the road and gets a win. The Niners can't go on a run with their defense. A little bit worried that Purdy hit the hand there at the end, but we haven't heard much from it. Give me the Niners, right? I've been on them all year, so I'm not just going to sit here and say they're going to lose immediately. I'll take the Niners in that spot. All right, moving on to the divisional round after that. Texans, Broncos. Give me Houston. I'll say that Denver's one and done in this spot. They played earlier in the year. Denver won 18-15. I just think they can ride that defense. And C.J. Stroud, right? It's funny. His rookie year, everyone's like, oh, my God, C.J. Stroud. And then ever since then, people don't want to give him any credit. I get their offense can be boring. I get he made a ton of stupid mistakes in the game against Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago. But C.J. Stroud, he makes the playoffs and he wins playoff games. That's what he does. That's what's happened since he's been in the league. So if they can, I trust him in the playoffs. Do I trust him more than I trust Josh Allen? No, but obviously, right? Do I trust him to get a couple of wins here in the playoffs with that defense? Right? I mean, this defense is insane. Right? The Seattle defense gets a ton of love, as they should. They're really good too, but I would rather have the Houston defense than the Seattle defense. Give me the Texans pulling off an upset, going into Mile High, winning that game. Patriots, Jags. I'll take the Patriots here in this spot. I'm sure it'll be cold weather there, next week in Gillette Stadium. And I think the Patriots, once they get the win against the Chargers, they'll really have some confidence because they're coming in with confidence, but there's still that unknown, I think, especially for Drake May. Okay, was potentially the MVP, but can I keep this going in the postseason? And then he's going to get some more confidence after they get that done, and I think they beat the Jaguars in that spot. I think Seattle is going to lose. I got both 1 seeds losing immediately. How about that? Which is, a lot of people say that's crazy, but I think Green Bay is going to go in there and win. Tough place to play. Give me LaFleur. Give me Jordan Love. Everyone wants to say, oh, they lost Micah, the defense, too many injuries. They got injuries, but I trust Halfley, and they still have enough guys out there. I'll take the Packers to pull off an upset in that spot. And then Rams-Niners, got to go with the Rams here. Just because that defense for the Niners. At some point, it's going to run out. Maybe it runs out in the wild card round against Philly, but they can't go on a run with that defense. Just can't happen. Can't happen. So that means Patriots, Texans, and Rams, Packers for our title games. I will take the New England Patriots. They'll have that game at home. In this case, obviously, if Denver loses, they'll have home field the rest of the way. And, I've got them winning. I think it'll be a low-scoring game, but they just make enough plays there. And I think, D'Amico's a great coach, but I think Vrabel's better in this spot. Patriots go back to the Super Bowl, a place where they are very familiar being, just this time with Drake May. I think the Rams beat the Packers. I think the Packers' magic runs out. I think they can pick up. I definitely think they beat the Bears. Maybe it's a little bit aggressive. Say they go into Seattle. Certainly is. But I think their magic runs out a little bit. Rams advance to the Super Bowl. That means Rams-Patriots is the Super Bowl, which, by the way, if that's the case, banger. Great quarterbacks, great coaches, two if you're guys for the MVP, the top 2 MVP candidates, that would be an unbelievable game. NFL would love it. I'll take the Rams in this spot. I do have some concern with Los Angeles because they're on the road, right? They didn't win the division. Seattle did. Now, I've got Seattle losing, but there's a world here where the Rams got to navigate this thing through the playoffs on the road. And there's some concern with how they finished the year. I think they're at that middle stage of the year. I think everybody was on the Rams. Feels like not as many people were on them. But what has this league shown you, right? Quarterback, coach. Stafford, McVay. It doesn't get better than that when you look at the scope of these playoffs. Devontae, we'll see how he does, right? How much he plays against Carolina, how he looks. I think that definitely is pivotal, right? If Devontae Adams goes out there and doesn't look like Devontae Adams or can't give you much, I think that changes things a little bit. But he's been resting that hamstring injury, and we'll see how he plays. But I expect Puka to play well. McVay's going to have him ready. The defense kind of odd. They've struggled a little bit more than I think we expected. But I think they've got some big-time players on there. Quentin Lake coming back is huge. That guy's one of the best defensive players in the NFL. He's tremendous. And, I got the Rams here in the spot. And then you're looking at Stafford. Again, I'd vote for him for MVP. But if he's MVP, 2-time Super Bowl champion, maybe he gets the Super Bowl MVP. Surefire Hall of Fame stuff, if that is the case. But I'll take the Rams here in the spot winning the Super Bowl. All right, before we get out of here, I do want to mention we kind of gave some thoughts early on about McDaniel. We'll touch on it here for a sec. Maybe go a little bit more in depth tomorrow once we get some more new information here. But to me, I was in on him coming back. I talk about the half in, half out thing all the time. If you want to get rid of the GM, keep the coach that has shown some positive things for you, I think you do that. There's been some culture issues, right, that kind of leaked early, or teams in these scrimmages, joint practices, are talking about Miami. Like, what are these guys doing? Like, they don't have respect for their staff, and they're not disciplined enough. That's a huge red flag. Schematically, McDaniel's great. He's going to be an OC next year. Maybe he's a head coach. Probably not a head coach, but he's definitely going to be an OC. He'll probably have a pick of where he wants to go there as an offense coordinator. But I think that, I think they feel good about getting John Harbaugh. I think they really do. Which is crazy because I think they were fine running it back with McDaniel. Clearly they were. I mean, he addressed the media early this week, and then, boom, this thing turns a couple of days later. So I think if Miami misses out on Harbaugh, they might be kicking themselves a little bit. But I think a move like this, they kind of feel decent about getting him, which is crazy because I don't know. It's very interesting. I'm thinking about this on the fly here. Would you rather go to Miami or would you rather go to New York? Right, I feel like, Miami, you got to deal with Vrabel twice and Josh Allen twice. In New York, you got the Eagles twice, but the Rams are the Commanders are kind of in shambles, and the Cowboys are the Cowboys. They're not going to be a real threat and win some games, but they don't scare you at all. I think there is something to being down in Florida at the end of your career if you're Harbaugh, right? Like if I was just up in Baltimore, that AFC North weather, right? I mean, send me to Miami over New York, personally. You need a new quarterback. You can't, especially if you're switching the head coach now, like you can't run it back with Tua. You're going to have to just eat that, which is going to be a little bit painful, but you can overcome it. Do you draft a guy? Do you trust Ty Simpson? Move up for a Dante Moore, maybe? I don't know. You try to get a bridge guy in there as well. Joe Flacco to Miami? I don't know. But the Miami job is, to me, it's intriguing just because it's Miami and it's the Dolphins, and it feels like it should be a prouder brand than what it is. Like for the majority of my life, the Dolphins have sucked, and even when they had Dan Marino, they weren't able to turn it into a world championship. So I don't know. That's going to be fascinating to watch. But if you move off McDaniel and you miss on Harbaugh, you could be in a tough spot, right? You could be in a real tough spot there. He'll be a coordinator somewhere. Commanders is a team that jumps right at you, right? Like, oh, Commanders, Jaden Daniels, McDaniel, that could work really well. In fact, I'm sitting here thinking about that, that might be the favorite for him to land in Washington. But we'll see. We'll see about Mike McDaniel there. Cliff Kingsbury, I want to touch on this. Speaking of Washington, gets relieved of his duties. Is he going to be a play caller somewhere? Probably, but I don't understand, really. Like, by all accounts, he's a really nice guy. And look, he's a good-looking guy, too, and I think that's worth mentioning, right? I think that's part of the reason why he continues to get these jobs, honestly. But he was over his skis in Arizona. That never really worked. He had Mahomes at Texas Tech. That didn't really work. As a quarterback coach at A&M with Johnny Football, that was kind of sweet, right? But I just haven't gotten enough from Cliff Kingsbury, and he seems like a cool guy, seems like a good hang. But I don't know. There's just this fascination with Cliff Kingsbury in the NFL and in football that I don't particularly understand. And his offenses haven't been that great. And, people were talking about him last year as a head coach. There's no way I would think that somebody hires him as a head coach this cycle, but a coordinator somewhere else, I don't know. To me, maybe he's kind of just a quarterback coach, and that's okay. But he seems a little bit overrated, in my opinion. But the Commanders are going to be looking for a new OC. McDaniel's the first name. It's like, well, there's a good chance he ends up there. But these jobs are coming open. It's crazy. Adding Miami into the mix. It kind of looked like for a second where it's like, this isn't that exciting. We just have these crappy teams. Crappy franchises with like Arizona and Tennessee and Cleveland open. But now you throw Baltimore and Miami into the mix, things get a little bit more exciting. And that'll be certainly something that we'll continue to monitor over the course of the next few weeks. Certainly looking forward to that. Appreciate everyone as always. We will be back tomorrow on a Friday. Enjoy the game tonight. Looking forward to talking about it tomorrow. And then, of course, Indiana, Oregon. Friday night banger. Certainly looking forward to that matchup tomorrow night. We'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll have our best bets of the weekend. We'll talk Bengals, and we'll see. Might have a guest tomorrow. Might just be me and you again, though. But check out the Paul Dehner interview. If you missed it, that'll be up on YouTube later today. Off the Bench and my show also out in podcast form wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to check it out. Appreciate everyone as always, and until tomorrow, take care, everybody.